Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about the new foundation from Natasha Denona. And so this is called the High-Glam Foundation, and it was just released, so I got it in the mail yesterday. And I tried it out on my skin for about 12 hours yesterday, and so I did get a pretty good sense of how it was performing on my own mature and dry and sensitive skin. And my feeling about this product is that it was pretty similar to the Fenty foundation that was released last year that is called the Soft Lit Foundation. And so what I decided to do today is to put this Fenty foundation on half of my face and to put the new Natasha Denona foundation on the other half of my face so that we will be able to compare in this video how they are looking and how they are performing. And then also in this video, I'm going to be doing a quick 5-minute makeup look using mostly Natasha Denona products. And one of those products is the new Mini Gloom eyeshadow palette. And I've actually really been liking this one very much. And Natasha Denona does not have any new lip products out, and so I thought that this might be a good chance to try out the new lip product from Chantecaille. And so I purchased one of these, and the one that I have is in a shade that is called Bamboo. And then I actually have 3 other colors that I got in this little kit. And so those colors are Pink Lotus and Rose Myrtle and Dragon Fruit. And so I will get a chance to show you what those look like in this video as well. And so first, a little bit of information about me. I am 61 years old, and I do have dry and mature and very sensitive skin. And I've never had any kind of cosmetic procedures like injections or surgery or lasers or any of that stuff. And so one thing that I am looking for when it comes to makeup is products that will help me to look a little bit fresher and maybe a little bit younger, and certainly that do not emphasize my wrinkles and make them look worse than they already are. And in addition, I do tend to be sensitive to many different kinds of products, and I have found that there are certain ingredients that always do irritate my sensitive skin, and I know that those ingredients tend to be very irritating for many other people as well, and so I just don't talk about products with those ingredients on this channel. And also, before we get started, I wanted to mention my Facebook group. So that is called 40 Plus Beauty with Lisa Petrison. And the idea of the group is to talk about all issues regarding maintaining a healthy and attractive appearance as we get older. And so if you're interested in that, then please come join us there. And so now a few facts about this new Natasha Denona foundation. It comes in 52 shades. It is a silicone-based foundation, and it is supposed to be long wear. And it is stated as being solid medium coverage, and I do think that that is accurate, and it's supposed to be buildable. So if you want to get more of coverage than medium, then you may be able to do that with this foundation as well. And it is made in Italy, but they say that it has a Korean formulation and that they are using Japanese pigments. And it is supposed to be blurring, and it is stated pretty strongly as having a radiant finish, so it is not supposed to really look dewy, but it is supposed to look a little bit more light reflecting than a matte foundation. And they said that it is supposed to last up to 18 hours on the skin, and that is something that Natasha Denona does seem to be really promoting, is how well it lasts on the skin. And so here is the bottle, and I think that the bottle is really quite lovely. It is frosted glass, and then it has a plastic top on the top of it that is kind of beige looking. And like most of the Natasha Denona compact products, it has an asymmetrical bottle, so the front part is square, and then the bottom part has a rounded back. And so one thing to know about this is that if you can put the cap on backwards, but it will look kind of strange when you do that. And so hopefully eventually I will get used to the idea that this part of the cap that says ND on here actually is supposed to go on the front. And I would say that the bottle is fairly similar to the Fenty bottle. So the Fenty bottle also has an interesting bottle shape, and it has frosted glass on it. So I think it's kind of similar. And they say that this is a serum foundation and that it has some skincare benefits to it. So what they say is that it is supposed to be evening your skin tone and reducing excess oil if you have it. And it is supposed to reduce signs of aging. And they say that supposedly if you have acne scars on your face and you use this for an extended period of time, that the acne scars may start to diminish. And it is supposed to be appropriate for all skin types, although they do seem to be focusing quite a bit of attention on people with oily skin or combination skin. But my feeling about this product is that they are saying that it's supposed to be appropriate also for dry skin or mature skin. And my own feeling with this one is that this is a foundation that I can wear and that I don't feel like it is making my skin dry or that it's a product that's really not meant for me. I do think that it is appropriate for me to be wearing. Now, it is the summer now, and so my skin is not quite as dry in the summer as it will get in the winter, and so I can try this on again later on in the year and see how I'm doing with it, but at least for this time of year, it seems to be fine for me. And when I look at the ingredient list, I do see several different kinds of silicones. These are non-cyclic silicones, so that is good, and that is consistent with where things are going in Europe. And it doesn't have any fragrance in it, so I'm happy about that. It has a bentonite in it, and so that may be part of what is causing it to be oil controlling. They say that it has bamboo powder and microalgae, and they say that that also balances excess oils, provides a radiant finish for dry to oily skin types without looking greasy, and that there's grape pomace. They say that that provides hydration and boosts collagen production and is anti-aging. And then jasmine mother cells, which they say boosts antioxidant defenses, brightens and fights hyperpigmentation. And white tea silver needle, they say blurs imperfections in skin texture, such as scars, defends, soothes, and repairs sensitive skin, calms and reduces redness immediately and over time, and strengthens the skin barrier. And so this foundation line has 52 shades, but the groupings that are in this foundation line seem to me to be quite different than the groupings in other companies. And so typically for other companies, they have grouped the foundations into warm, neutral, and cool, and then sometimes you will have olive. And in this case, they have grouped the foundations into peach, neutral, cool or red, and then also yellow. And so the different thing about this is that in most lines, peach and neutral are all grouped together, and so foundations that are peach that have a balance of pink tones and yellow tones tend to be just stuck into the neutral category, and in this case, they are putting them in their own separate category. And then there are some mixes, so there's some foundations that are red neutral, there's some that are yellow peach, there's some that are yellow neutral, and there's some that are red peach. And they do not have anything that is marked as being olive, but she does say that the yellow tones are supposed to be for people with yellow skin or people with olive skin. And I am not sure if I had ever thought about the idea that yellow and olive are similar. And so I don't know how that will work for people with olive skin. But I do think it's the case that when I see people with olive skin, the thing that they seem to be complaining about the most is that when they try a shade that is neutral, it always goes really orange on them. And so I think that what they're doing here is that by taking the peach and bringing them into their own category, and peach is basically orange, that the foundations that are remaining in the neutral category probably are more leaning into the grayish or greenish type of tones, much more so than the peach ones. So maybe it is the case that people with green skin, olive skin, will be able to find a good match for them, either in the yellow versions or in the neutral versions, but that remains to be seen, and I am looking forward to seeing what people with olive skin think. And so what Natasha Denona said was that her exploration into developing a new shade system was due to, in large part, her own inability to find a good shade for herself. And she is from Croatia. And one thing that I found out when I looked at a map is that Croatia is really only about 100 miles from Romania. And so half of my own relatives are from Romania. And when I look at pictures of people from Romania, or if I think about the color of skin that my dad had, that's definitely a really strong peach color, almost always among people from that country. And I don't think that my skin is quite as peach because half of my relatives are from Northern Europe, mostly Ireland. And so I think it's diluted a little bit for me, and I do have a lighter skin tone unless I get tan. But especially if I do get tan, my skin will get really, really peach like that. And so that is one thing that has frustrated me a lot about using various foundations, is that in a lot of cases, the foundations that I use that are labeled as neutral, which are supposed to be a balance of yellow and pink, that they oftentimes tend to be not peach enough for me, and they tend to be kind of looking gray on my skin, or kind of not very saturated, or even a little bit greenish. And the shades that I have found that have worked for me, they either can be labeled as neutral or cool. And usually they are not labeled as warm, but once in a while I will find a foundation line that will have my best matches being labeled warm. So it's a little bit frustrating in order to even start looking for a good shade for me. And so on the Natasha Denona website, of course, there is a shade matching tool where you can put in the foundation and the shade that you are currently finding to work for you, and then it will recommend a shade from their new line. And my observation was that I did each of these individually for all of the foundation shades that I have liked, and consistently it either recommended to me P1 or P2, which is Peach 1 or Peach 2. And so I thought that that was really impressive, actually. And I did see on Instagram an interview with Natasha Denona where she talked in depth about the shade development, and they do actually have people, 52 people, with different skin tones that she used to test the foundations on, and they also made a really big effort to make the shades consistent with the concealers. And she said that even if the concealer and the foundation look different in the bottle or when you put it on your hand, that when it goes into the skin, it is designed to work the same. And so I think that if you do use the Natasha Denona concealer, that should be a really good starting point, at least, for you to choose a shade. Now, I do have the Natasha Denona powder foundation, and this is a really, really terrific powder foundation. This one has been my favorite of all the powder foundations that I've tried so far, and I have been trying out quite a few of them this year because there's been a bunch released. And I do really like this product, and there is no P1 in this, but I did pick up P2 with the hope that that peach would be a good shade for me, and I think that this has been an excellent match for me also. And so I do feel like the shade of this powder is very similar to the P1 foundation in the liquid form that I got. But there are a lot fewer shades in the powder foundation, but apparently the shades that do exist are the same ones as the liquid foundation, or at least that's the intention. And so in terms of the shade that I chose, I felt like my skin tone was somewhere between P1 and P2 based on the photos, and then also based on the recommendations that the system was giving me. And so I chose the lighter shade because I thought that that was a little bit of a safer bet. And I do feel like it is slightly lighter than my skin tone, but very similar in terms of the undertone, and that when I massaged it into my skin, it disappeared very easily. And so I do think that this is a really good shade for me, and I am really impressed with how easy it was for me to find a good shade for myself. And I think that probably the P2 would have worked okay for me also. It just would have been a little tiny bit darker. So I do kind of think that separating out peach from the rest of the neutral shades is kind of brilliant. and that it may result in people that have more of olive-leaning skin tones being able to find a good shade for themselves. And it certainly has been effective for me in terms of finding a good shade for me. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing what other people report about how they do with these shades. Now, it's my understanding, based on those Instagram videos, that this new foundation is supposed to be somewhat similar to the Natasha Denona concealer, and I have not tried that. And the reason is because that includes fragrance in it, and fragrance always is irritating for me, and I'm finding it a little perplexing why anyone would put fragrance into a concealer. But maybe they have some kind of ingredient in that concealer that they were trying to cover up. I'm not sure. But in any case, the concealer is supposed to be a high coverage concealer, and a lot of people do really like it. I did take a look at the Sephora reviews to see what people were complaining about, and it does seem like a lot of people either did object to the fragrance or mentioned that the fragrance was pretty strong, or that they were reporting that it was irritating for them, and some of them said that it was quite irritating. So I do think that that's probably not a good product for me, but I am really happy that this new foundation doesn't have any fragrance or anything like that in it, and I'm not noticing any noticeable unpleasant smell at all from this. I think it's been perfectly fine for me. And so in terms of my experience with the formula, I do feel like, again, that this is very, very similar to the Fenty foundation that was released last year. I think it's so similar that I am kind of guessing that they may have gotten the formula from the same laboratory that makes the Fenty foundation. Now, it is the case that this one has a more radiant finish, and so the Fenty foundation looks much more matte, and it is called a soft matte foundation, and then this one is called a radiant foundation. And what she said was that her goal here was to create a foundation that did have some more luminosity to it, and that she felt like if you had oily skin and you were using an oil controlling foundation, that typically meant that your foundation was looking matte, and that she thought that some people with oily skin would enjoy having the option of having a radiant foundation, and so that was part of the differentiating point for her foundation line. And I do feel like even after the foundation dried that it did look a little bit shiny on my skin, but that putting a very small amount of powder, and not even oil-absorbing powder, took care of that very easily. And so this Fenty foundation is from Korea, and of course the Natasha Denona foundation was made in Italy, but it's using a Korean formulation. And one thing to know about these Korean foundations, I think, is that they do go on very, very thin. And that is also the case with the House Labs foundation, which is also from Korea. And I think that all three of these foundations for me have done a good job of providing a substantial amount of coverage without emphasizing my wrinkles, and really without looking like I'm wearing very much foundation at all. And so I think that that is a real breakthrough, and that it is interesting that they have chosen to actually manufacture this foundation in Italy, but they are using that Korean recipe. And so again, like the Fenty foundation, this is supposed to be long wear. And according to the Natasha Denona people, it's supposed to be lasting for 18 hours. And so yesterday I wore it for about 12 hours, I think, when I was awake, and then I actually fell asleep in it, and I woke up in the middle of the night and then tried to get it off of my skin. And so I think it held up really well. I think that even after all of that time, it was looking pretty good on my face. It was looking just a tiny little bit like I had something on, but I think for the most part, it was looking really good to me. And it was cool outside yesterday, and so I didn't get a chance to see how it performed in the heat or when I was sweating, but I did go for a long walk with my dog, and I think that it held up really, really well. And as I say, my skin is very sensitive, and foundations seem to be especially problematic for me because many of them do have slight amounts of ingredients in them that are irritating. But I haven't found this particular foundation from Natasha Denona to be irritating to my skin at all, and I also didn't find the Fenty foundation to be irritating for my skin at all. Both of those seem to have been fine. Yesterday I did use the Natasha Denona foundation over the pseudo primer that I usually use, which is from Ilia, and that is called the Base Face Milk, I think. And so that provides a little bit of protection to my skin, but today I put it just directly on top of my skin without putting anything on top of it before that, and I think that it's been perfectly fine today. I'm not having any irritation today either. So that is a good thing. So everything is good up to this point, but the real kicker here for me is with regard to makeup removal. And so my feeling is that, first of all, I don't use silicone foundations all that often. I don't feel like my skin reacts to silicone, but I do feel like when I put silicone in, especially certain silicone foundations on my skin, that they provide kind of a tight layer on my skin. And so therefore, first of all, I feel like, especially if I start to sweat, that it doesn't easily evaporate, and so that's a little bit uncomfortable in some cases. But I think even more importantly, there are certain foundations that I have a hard time removing. And especially if they are long wear, then they can stick to my skin in some cases really, really well and be really almost impossible to get off. And that is the reason that I have not used that Fenty foundation except to review when I was using it to review it, because it does stick to my skin really, really well. And so my experience with the Fenty foundation was that an oil double cleanse, where I use oil first and then use something else to remove the oil, that really did not work very well at all to take off that Fenty foundation. And oftentimes I will use either the Pharmacy Cleansing Balm or the Clinique Take the Day Off Cleansing Balm. And I think that works really well for most foundations, including most silicone foundations. But I didn't find that worked very well for the Fenty foundation either. Eventually, I did conclude that if I used the Lisa Eldridge cleansing balm on my skin, and if I used maybe 2 or 3 times as much as Lisa Eldridge recommends using, and then I left it on my skin for maybe half an hour or so, that did manage to get the foundation off to the point that my skin felt like my skin rather than a layer of silicone on my skin. And so I am a little bit more willing to use the Fenty foundation because I discovered that, but nonetheless, I actually haven't done that. And I do think that the Fenty foundation is actually really attractive, and I do think that it would cover up issues on my skin really well and that it looks really pretty. But on the other hand, my real goal is to try to improve my skin quality to the point that I don't need to use foundation at all. And so if I am using a product that I can't get off my skin, and that is resulting in irritation as a result of dirt or oil or bacteria or fungus or dead skin cells being trapped underneath the silicone, and that makes my skin look worse, then that is going against really my goal with regard to beauty in general. And so that is why I tended to shy away from anything that I feel like is either providing too tight of a barrier on my skin or that I can't get off very easily. And so although this Natasha Denona product is clearly marked as being long wear, my hope was that maybe I would be able to get it off a little bit easier than I did the Fenty foundation. As it turns out, this is even more difficult to get off than the Fenty foundation. And that when I woke up in the middle of the night, I tried several different methods of getting this foundation off my skin, including the Lisa Eldridge balm with a large amount of the product and left on my skin for well over half an hour. And I still feel like my skin had a layer of silicone on it by the time I gave up and went to bed. So it might be the case that if I were going to be going, for instance, to some kind of an event, and if I had some kind of issue on my face that I really wanted to cover up, and it was going to be something like a wedding, or if I was going to be performing in concert like Rihanna, something like that, then I think that this might be a really, really good product to use because it would certainly hold up, I think, to sweating probably. and to a long wear, and I think it would continue to look beautiful. But as something for me to wear just for the sake of wearing it to look a little bit better for my everyday life, I am a little disinclined to do that because I feel like there's a price to pay, and if I can't get it off, that my skin will probably end up looking worse for a while. Oh, yeah, and then after I gave up, I put on a really thick layer of the Drunk Elephant Bora Barrier Cream, which has a lot of oil in it, and I just left it on my skin like for many hours until I woke up, and I still feel like I haven't been able to get that silicone foundation off, so it is very, very stubborn. And after I watched those Instagram videos with Natasha Denona, I realized that she really is talking an awfully lot about long wear. So I think that it was purposeful and that she did kind of try to outdo Fenty in terms of this aspect. And all of this is kind of too bad because apart from this long wear thing, I really do like this foundation a lot. I think it's, in a lot of ways, it's similar to the House Labs foundation, which I do really, really like, but that one I can get off. And so if Natasha Denona were to create a version of this one that didn't have all that stickiness to it, and I'm not sure which ingredient it is that makes this so long wear, but if they had a foundation that was like this, but that I could get off, then I would be inclined to use it. But with this one, I just am having a hard time in my life seeing a need for me to wear it that is that important that I'm willing to go ahead and use it. So a note from the editing room, after I finished filming this video, I watched a video reviewing this foundation from Khaki Reviews Beauty on YouTube. And like me, she has dry skin, but she did report having a really different experience with this foundation. So she said that for her it never dried down and that it looked like a super hydrating skin tint for her. And my guess is that the reason for this is because she used both the Tatcha Dewy Skin Moisturizer and the Tatcha Sunscreen underneath it. And both of those products do include synthetic type oils in them. And so what I am thinking may have happened is that the bamboo stem extract and the bentonite in the foundation may have sucked up as much of that oil as they could, and that this changed the way that the foundation performed. And I haven't heard anything from Natasha Denona about what kind of skin prep works well with this foundation, but my takeaway from this is that maybe it's the case that applying this on bare skin or on top of a primer that doesn't include oil in it might be more likely to make the foundation perform in the way that it is intended to perform. Now, personally, I virtually never wear sunscreen under foundation, and so this was not an issue for me. I usually choose either one or the other. If I'm going to be getting a lot of sun, then I just use sunscreen, maybe with a little concealer, or otherwise I rely on my SPF 50 hat for sun protection, and so far that strategy has worked really, really well for me. But there may be some sunscreens that don't contain much oil that might work better under this Natasha Denona foundation, so I guess people are going to have to do some experimentation for that. In terms of the shade match, Khaki Reviews Beauty chose N2, and she said that it was a really good shade match in terms of the undertone, but that it was a little bit dark. But there are two other neutral foundation shades that are lighter than that one, so I think that it seems like she could be able to get maybe a better match if that one really is too dark for her. And in general, I do feel really optimistic that the work that Natasha Denona put into the shades may end up being really impressive and really a game changer in terms of how we think about foundation shades. But I am less sure about this foundation formula, and so I will be interested in hearing more reports about that. And by the way, both times I used this foundation, I used one pump on each side of my face. And for the Fenty foundation, I also used one pump. And my feeling is that for most foundations, that using two pumps for the entire face is a substantial amount of foundation that offers good coverage. And I do think that that was the case with this Natasha Denona foundation as well. And with this Natasha Denona foundation, the way that I applied it, I do feel like I could have built it up with more foundation and that would have provided even more coverage for me. And so now I have some footage of my putting on the rest of a makeup look over that foundation. And so I didn't realize when I did this yesterday that I could use that foundation on my eyelids. I am a little bit concerned about putting that on my eyelids because I feel like I'm never going to get it off, but we will see. And so yesterday I used the Sarah Creel Face Flex as an eye lid primer, and so that is in the shade 3.0, and that is an expensive concealer, but I do think it works really well as a concealer. I think it also works really well as an eyelid primer, and it's a little bit expensive, but you do get an awfully lot of it in this container, and so I think that that makes it worthwhile for me. And then I am quickly putting on brows using one of my favorite makeup tools of all, which is the Jones Road Brow Pencil. And that goes on really fast. There's little fibers in that pencil, and so therefore it creates the look of there being real eyebrows rather than something that is drawn on, but it also goes on super fast, so I really, really like it. And then I have this little eye palette, and this is called the Mini Gloom Eye Palette. It's $27, and I tend to like these little Natasha Denona eye palettes. They have 5 different shades in them, and they are fairly reasonably priced. So I have all of the ones that do not have aluminum powder in them, and I'll show you a list of all of the Natasha Denona products that I have tried in terms of how much I have liked them. And I would say that this green one I really, really like, actually. It has 5 different shades in it, and 4 of them have a little bit of a lean to green. So there is this olive shade, there's a bright green shade that has a little bit of a shimmer in it. The olive shade's a matte one. And then there is one that's kind of a cream shade, but that definitely has an olive lean to it. And there's a dark brown shade that has just a little bit of an olive color to it that I think has worked well for me as an eyeliner. And then there's a pink shade, and that one's not really green, but I think it coordinates really well with these other colors. And so I really am thinking that at least in terms of small eyeshadow palettes, this one is my favorite of all. Of course, I do really like these colors, both because I feel like greens work well on my eyes, and also because they are kind of muted and grungy colors, and so that works a little bit better for me with my low contrast complexion. But in any case, I don't feel like this has been irritating for my eyes at all. I have put it on over a concealer, and it doesn't have any aluminum powder in it, and I think that this is a spectacular release from Natasha Denona, and I was really hoping that I was going to like this one a lot, and I liked it even more than I was thinking that I would. So I'll just say that with regard to the Louis Vuitton eyeshadow palettes, those are $250, and it looks like that case is lovely, but I have no hope whatsoever that the eyeshadows in that palette are going to be as good as these eyeshadows, either in terms of the color stories or in terms of the formula. I think that these are really spectacular, and so I would suggest that if you are interested in this color story, this is well worth picking up, and it's only $27. And so for the eye look, I created slightly different looks on each eye just to try to give a sense of whether or not it was possible to get a variety of looks from this palette. And certainly with these different colors in here, you can get some different looks because not all the colors are exactly the same. And so on one eye, I used this dark brown as an eyeliner, and then on the other eye, I used my new Natasha Denona eyeliner pencil, and this is in a shade that is called Taupe. And I have seen several companies come out with taupe eyeliners recently, and that has made me really happy because I think that taupe is a really good eyeliner color for me, and that if I want a look that is not real dramatic, that provides just enough emphasis for my eyes, but not so much that I look really made up. And so it is the case that Makeup by Mario now has a new taupe eyeliner, and I see that Sarah Creel is coming out with a line of eyeliners, and there's a taupe one in that also. So taupe eyeliners, I think, are getting to be more popular, and I think there's a good reason for that. And when I put the Natasha Denona foundation on, my skin definitely looks a little bit on the shiny side, so I decided to try the Saie Slip Tint Undetectable Setting Powder for $32, and I have the color of Translucent 2, which is supposed to be for light to medium skin. So I'm not always a real big fan of Saie, but I actually think that this powder is super, super nice, and that it actually seems to me very similar to the Pat McGrath Under Eye Setting Powder. I think that you get more in this product, and that in general, this is a really, really finely milled powder. It's made in Italy, and it seems to just disappear into my skin really, really well. And I'm using it under my eyes, but I'm using it on my face in general. And as powders go, I'm really extraordinarily impressed with this one, actually. And I have used a lot of other good powders, but this one is a really nice product from Saie. I'm really quite pleased to see something new come on the market that I like this much. And I think with this foundation, it's not really needing that much powder. It needs just a tiny little bit of powder that would kind of disappear into it. And so I think that the Saie powder worked well for that. And then one of the first blushes that was released in early 2025 was this one from Natasha Denona, which is called the High Blush, and I think there were something like 8 different shades. This is a blush duo, and my feeling was back in the winter that this looked really bright and that I should come back and try it on in the spring. So it's this particular version that I have is called Simply Shy, and it says that it has a light dusty coral and icy light pink, but really all of these shades are peach. And that may be because Natasha Denona just likes peach because her skin is peach. But in any case, I felt like during the winter it was a little bit on the bright side, but that when I put it on during the summer, it's actually been working really well for me. So I was hoping that that would be the case. And I think that it kind of coordinates well with this eye look also, that it's just provides a kind of a natural looking blush, at least for me. And it's a little bit strange to have a coral blush and an icy pink highlighter, but I think it's actually been fine for me. I've actually liked that look, especially for summer. And this is a fairly moisturizing blush. It has coconut derivatives and some squalane in it. And I think that it goes on my skin really nice. It blends really easily, and I haven't had any problems with it irritating my skin. And it's lasted pretty long in terms of holding up on my skin, even when there's a lot of sweating and things like that. So I think it's been a really good summer blush for me, and that maybe if she had introduced this more in the summer, people would have liked it more. And then another new product that I've really been liking is the Westman Atelier lip pencil, and those were released maybe a month or two ago, and I think that these are really terrific. So they come in a variety of neutral type shades, so they're supposed to provide a little bit of contour to your lips, and I think they're specifically designed for overlining. And I'm not always a big fan of overlining on my own lips, but I feel like these are so easy to use, and they go on so easily, and they are just a little bit sticky and a little tiny bit gummy, but I think in a way that makes them really easy to use and really easy to do an overline with them, and that they look really good and they taste good, of course, and they just feel like, compared to most of the other lip liners that I've used that are for this purpose, I think that these are working actually better than any of them. And so I have been using that a lot, and I have 2 different shades in this. I have Biscuit, which is more of a brown shade, and then I have Petal, which is more of a pink shade. And so I think for the first lip look, I'm using the Biscuit one. And then over the top of that, I put this lipstick from Chantecaille. And so this comes in an aluminum case, and it's 100% aluminum, and so it actually is recyclable, at least if you manage to use up all the lipstick and then clean it out real well. And you could put it in your recycling bin. It's not refillable, however, so that part is unfortunate. And so this particular shade is a neutral brown shade, and it's really light, fairly light. And I think that if I use this in conjunction with the lip liner, and especially maybe with that brown biscuit type of a lip liner, it gives a really muted look that I think kind of is a little bit on the grungy side, and so it kind of is in keeping with the eyeshadow look. And then I have 3 more shades of that Chantecaille Lip Creme lipstick, and so I decided to use the Petal shade of lip liner to go with those, and so they come in this little kit. And this is something that I got from Chantecaille because I purchased a certain amount of products from Chantecaille, and so it has the 3 lipstick shades, and then it actually has a little lip brush in here. So I think that that is kind of cute. And so the 3 shades of lipstick that come in this little kit are Pink Lotus and Rose Myrtle and Dragon Fruit. And I like all 3 of these colors. I think that the Pink Lotus one is the one that I am liking most out of the 3, and that is the one that I am wearing today. And I like this lipstick enough that I would be tempted to buy another shade, and maybe buy this Pink Lotus shade. I think it's very, very pretty, so you can tell me what you think of it. Chantecaille usually has some good Black Friday sales. And this lipstick comes in a container that is all aluminum, so I think that that is nice. You do need to use up all of the lipstick that is in the container before you can recycle it, and I think that that was why they decided that they needed to develop a lip brush. And so the lip brush was not very expensive, and so I did pick that up in large part because I wanted to get these lipstick samples. And I am a little bit disappointed with that lip brush. It is made out of plastic, and it seems to me like it's not much different in quality than maybe a $5 or $6 lip brush that I might buy on Amazon. And so I am kind of a lip brush fan, and I do have a bunch of different lip brushes. The one that I like the most is the Chanel one. I think that that one is worth the amount that they're charging for it. And then there are some other ones that I've liked as well. But I do feel like the more that I have used this new Chantecaille lip product, which is called the Lip Creme, the more that I have actually liked it. I think it is kind of a regular lipstick. It doesn't seem real super hydrating to me. But my lips seem to be doing fine with it, and I don't feel like I need to do anything like put a lip primer down first. It does feel good on my lips, and I think that especially now that I've tried these other colors, I think that it is very attractive. And it does stay on my lips pretty well. I don't feel like it gets all smeared around or anything like that. And the latter 2 of these colors seem to be leaning a little bit more towards being a purplish pink type colors, and so I felt like they were not necessarily coordinating well with that peach blush, and so I got out my YSL Make Me Blush Powder Blush and the shade Nude Lavalier, and I think that helped a little bit in terms of making the look a little more coordinated. And so now let's look at the comparison between the new Natasha Denona Foundation and the Fenty Foundation. And as I said, I think that the main difference that I am seeing is that the Natasha Denona one is more radiant, so it looks a little bit more wet on the skin, and it feels slightly more wet, but it's not a big difference. And it doesn't seem to me that that should be a deal killer in terms of whether or not to choose the Natasha Denona Foundation, because I do feel like when I put powder down on top of it that the radiance was very easily taken care of. And for this, I was just using the new setting powder from Kosas that is in loose form. And so I just used a very, very small amount of powder on the brush, and then I put it on both sides of my face. And I feel like after I put that powder down, that it has looked pretty similar on both sides of my face. And I actually haven't put any powder down in the several hours since I put that foundation on earlier this morning. And I feel like both sides are still continuing to look the same now. And so I find that to be really interesting. But I think in terms of what it looks like on my face, that these are very, very similar foundations. I feel like you might be able to tell if you look very, very closely that I'm wearing foundation, but I think that for the most part, it's doing a pretty good job of providing quite a lot of coverage without seeming like I'm actually wearing any makeup at all. And so that is really an accomplishment, and I am really glad that foundations have moved this far along that they can do that. And one thing that Natasha Denona said in the video was that when she is using her liquid foundation, that at the end she will take a little tiny bit of the powder foundation and use that as a setting powder just to take down the radiance on any areas of the face that she thinks are looking too shiny. And so I didn't do that with this because I didn't want there to be conflict between the foundation that was the powder one and this one, but I think I could probably try that a little bit now, and we can see what my face is looking like. So I do think it's interesting that even though the Natasha Denona foundation looked quite radiant at the beginning, I think that it's really not looking any more radiant at all now than the soft matte foundation from Fenty. But I did put a little bit of powder down on top of it, and so you can see what you think of that. But I kind of even don't think it's necessary, and that even though I powdered quite a long time ago, that seems to be holding up just fine. Maybe that Kosas is just a really, really good powder, and I think that that is the case. I do really feel impressed with that particular powder, and I think it's fairly similar to the pressed powder, which has always been one of my very favorites. Maybe I even like this new loose powder more. Of course, this Kosas powder only comes in these color-correcting powders, and I think that the amount of color that you get from this is very, very mild, so I don't think that that should be a reason that would keep people from using this powder. But I also do suspect that eventually they will be releasing the regular skin-colored powders in this as well, because I do think it's a really good formula. And so if you're interested, you can look at my grade sheets for other similar foundations that I have tried to see how the new foundation stacks up with the ones that I have tried in the past. And an A+ are foundations that I actually do use personally. And then A are foundations that I don't actually use, but that I do think are really good. And I always am a little bit torn whether or not that Fenty foundation should be an A or a B, because I do really like everything about it except for the fact that I have a hard time getting it off my face. And so the same thing is the case with this new Natasha Denona foundation. So thank you very much for watching all the way to the end of the video. And in the comments section, please let me know what you think of this foundation, if you are interested in it, if long-wear foundations are something that you ever use or are interested in using. In addition, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, then I hope you will go ahead and do that. And if you like the video, then I hope you will hit like. Thanks very much for watching the video. Coco and I do love you very much. So goodbye. Ba-da-ba-da-da-da.